Hello, class. The article that I chose for my news podcast is called The Impact of COVID-19 on Gender Pay Equality in the UK Workplace. And this is focusing on how this has negatively affected women across all employment sectors. Back in 1970, the UK enforced the Equal Pay Act of 1970, which was the first part of the UK's legislation that set out the right to pay equality between men and women when it came to similar work, work rated as equivalent, and work of equal value. Currently, 77% of the frontline workers in the UK are women, with many other women still working in essential sectors such as healthcare, education, and food production. Women on average do 60% more unpaid work than men, which causes a domino effect of less wages, less paid time off, less security, and the list goes on. The UK Women's Budget Group said they are worried the impact on women's earnings and employment prospects will widen existing gender inequalities, not just the gender wage gap. Regarding the current situation of the global pandemic, I really feel that a gender pay gap shouldn't be as prominent as it really is. Many are financially struggling, as we all know, and this is making it even more challenging for women, especially ones that are mothers and still working. This is also increasing the risk of having to rely on public services and Social Security, as well as being more likely at risk for poverty. Every year in the UK, private sector businesses are required to publish their gender pay gap statistics. Although 2 weeks before the deadline this year of April 4th, the UK government announced that due to the pandemic, there would be no mandatory requirement to report that gender pay gap data for 2020. The Minister for Women and Equalities and the Chair of Equality of Human Rights Commission said that they felt it was only right to suspend enforcement of gender pay gap reporting this year. And after the suspension of requiring to report, only 50% of companies actually reported that were normally required to report. In 2019, the UK Office for National Statistics found that there was a 17.3% pay gap between men and women in the UK when considering part and full-time employees. And the results of this statistic, it's calculated by measuring the difference between average hourly earnings, excluding overtime, of men and women as a proportion of average hourly earnings, excluding overtime again, of just men's earnings across all jobs in the UK. I myself personally find it astonishing that the UK government did not require companies to submit the gender pay gap statistic because regardless of the pandemic, many companies are still functioning and paying their workers, which means the gender pay gap is still happening. I think it should have just extended the deadline, kind of like what we did in America for our taxes this last year or this current year, although that's not the case. They probably did it, I think, to take stress off some companies as the deadline was April 4th and everything shut down in March, but I just wouldn't have handled it the way that they did. I kind of feel like as a woman, from my perspective, it makes me feel like it was in a way sneaky to a point, and it almost just kind of feels like it's not important anymore, if that makes sense. And according to the Business in the Community, which describes themselves as the oldest and largest business-led membership organization dedicated to responsible business, they warn that the pandemic could set back women's equality a whole generation in the UK. Charlotte Woodworth, the Gender Equality Campaign Director at Business in the Community, said pay gap reporting is a vital tool in understanding and tackling gender inequality at work. If we don't have a clear picture of women's status at work entering the crisis, we won't be able to take the right steps going forward. In these difficult times, businesses that choose to put equality and inclusion at the heart of their response will end up better placed to flourish in the future. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that employers can adapt and offer remote and flexible working arrangements, which may support both men and women in a manner that promotes greater equality across their working practices. If it's handled well, these measures could have a positive impact in reducing the gender pay gap going forward. I chose this article because I don't feel that unequal pay should still be happening in a country like the UK, or in any country for that matter. As a woman working on my career, it's a challenge that I know I will have to face at some point later on, even though I honestly wish it never existed. I hope this is something that does lessen over time because in my opinion, your pay comes down to your skill, not what you look like, what your gender is, all the above. Overall, I just know that women, including myself, I'm going to have to work harder to lessen that gap. So that brings me to my discussion questions, and my first discussion question is, do you think other factors contribute to the gender pay gap, such as age, race, ethnicity, religion, etc.? My answer to that is I do think that other factors contribute to the gender age gap. I think it's not just the fact that, I mean, sometimes I think it is that, oh, it's just she's a woman, or other times I think it's a combination of things, or oh, maybe she's too young of a woman or too old of a woman, or a certain religion. And I'm not trying to get into other topics of diversity and equity, as I know I chose gender, but I do think they all kind of mesh together in some ways in certain areas, and it's not just one thing. Sometimes it's usually an accumulation. And my second discussion question is, how can we persuade top management that gender pay equity is important? And ultimately, equal gender pay comes down to just, I feel like, doing the right thing and just having the right morale. But some ways you can kind of frame it for top management or companies to make them kind of see the good or a reason to do it is like through a risk management lens, and make them see that this could backfire on them in the future, and that like if someone did an audit or investigated in the company, they could find out and expose them for it, and that would then ruin their brand and their look and everything. So sometimes you gotta give them hindsight. That's one way. Or you can get another suggestion I saw was getting committees getting involved with human capital management to show like the success planning and personal development, and making sure there's good human capital with men and women throughout the company as well as in their career. Those were my answers to my discussion questions. Feel free to leave yours below if you have any answers or anything to question me on as well, and thank you.